Welcome to the new Cyber Frontier, bringing you the latest news and initiatives that focus on the development of cybersecurity economics. You don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert to get plugged in. Your host brings it straightforward, asks the tough questions, and brings the cyber world to a level of understanding for everyone. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join our host as he introduces the topic for today's new Cyber Frontier.
Welcome to New Cyber Frontier. I'm your host, Timothy Montgomery, and today we have Kim William Corona? Coroma.
Actually, we might want to cut it. It's Tina.
Tina.
Sorry.
Oh, my
yes.
bad.
That's okay.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
I should have at that. Okay, let's do this again. I don't know where my head is going now. All right, so, welcome to another show for New Cyber Frontier. I'm your host, Timothy Montgomery, and today I have with me a lovely host named Tina Williams Coroma.
Yes.
Got it, yes. I always seem to be bad with names, and I think most people are going to realize that as I do these things more and more, so I apologize up front.
No worries.
Anyways, so how are you doing today? I mean...
I'm doing pretty good.
I read a little bit about you, and it sounds like you're just kind of doing all kinds of things and just out there. And it looks like you won a couple of awards there, and you're a couple of different adventures. But the one that comes to mind is Cyber Skills or Sci Skills. I guess that's the pronunciation there. And education primarily. It looks like your background's in training and doing actually connecting to businesses and being able to support their needs to get into compliances. I saw that CMMC in there. That seems to be like it's going to be coming big here in just a short while as the DoD or the military or government in general is going to decide to enforce it as we go along. So that'll be very interesting. I've got some auditing in my background as well, and I'm just interested to see how it's going to start out. I think we're going to have a hard time with that, in my opinion. But anyway, I digress.
Yes.
So we're here to talk about you more. Today we got some interesting topics. And we're going to talk a lot about cybersecurity in the business arena and some of the management security through changes. Some of the other topics I think is more or less facts about some of the changes of systems and environments. And what else you got here for me? And managing third-party risk. I like those topics a lot. Yeah. So if we can get that far in this, because 9 times out of 10 we will talk so far that. It'll be all this. Anyway, Tina, if that's a good enough introduction from you, or would you like to introduce yourself a little further of some kind? That'd be okay with me right now. So,
I think you nailed most of it. I've been in the cyber field for about 19 years now. Started out very technical as a software developer, made a quick pivot to network security and computer forensics and managing security projects. So I've been in the field, kind of had my toe in various parts of the cyber waters for some time. So I think it's a very captivating field and certainly a lot of directions you can go within the field. So I'm really happy to be here chatting with you about it today.
Yeah, lots of interesting things happening these days, isn't it, in the cyber field? Lots of craziness out there and lots of things to look forward to solving for the most part, right?
Indeed.
So a lot of your training and kind of some of the things it looks like you set up as business is more educating the business part of this as far as cybersecurity goes. So, I mean, your type of customer, what do you kind of see a lot of these days, and how do you build your curriculum to that stuff? So, I mean, what's the logic behind there?
Yeah, so, really with Sci Skills, the platform, it's really focused on increasing the cyber acumen of non-tech and non-cyber professionals for a portion of our courses. And so, with that, there was the whole Solarium project that came out largely last year. And some of the findings within that Solarium report for cybersecurity is that the cyber acumen of just the average U.S. citizen needs to be increased, right? Like cyber is a part of our everyday lives, and that's most certainly the case with business. So whether you have human resources professionals that need to be recruiting for cyber individuals, I saw like a little kind kind of like a comic strip one time. And basically it was saying that a recruiter was requiring 7 years of experience for like this cyber technology that had only been in existence for like 3 years.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just like, so it's kind of like, I mean, it's like,
22.
Right. You kind of laugh at it, but it's just like, oh my gosh, like, it's not that you're expecting the human resources professional to be on top of every kind of, cyber technology or tool necessarily, but it also like represents a disconnect between those, who are in position to identify the right or best candidates and like what their real requirements are. And, there's already challenges enough with like a shortage of cyber professionals, not to add on to it, having individuals that are in place to do the screening and the hiring that don't really understand enough to identify when they have a great candidate in front of them or not. That's right. So that's where, SciSkills is really just kind of looking at some of the different business professions and identifying where cyber is relevant to those professions, even if they aren't cyber specific professions. They're ones that need to have a certain level of acumen about cybersecurity terminology, what it deals with, roles and titles and work functions, things like that.
Yeah, there certainly is a need for that. So, Tina, we're going to take a break and we'll be right back after hearing a message from our sponsors.
Blockframe Technology offers next-generation blockchain-managed trust and security. Unique non-fungible tokens are used to secure software bills of materials to provide data quality and security for every transaction in your supply chain. Deploy advanced peer-to-peer product security, scale zero trust capability to millions of IoT devices, allow vendor tracking and accountability, and rapidly reset from compromise. Unchangeable, time-sequenced blockchain data provides next-generation security using machine learning trust algorithms and audit analytics. Start securing your supply chain today by contacting Blockframe at www.blockframetech.com.
We're back with New Cyber Frontier. I'm your host, Tim Montgomery. I'm here with Tina, and she is actually, you're the president of this SciSkill, right? So it's actually a business, and we were talking before the break about some of the things that where your customer base set and kind of just how that curriculum fits in with what do you think, as some of the things in the field seem to mature more and more in the cybersecurity field, the professionals and some of the things where we launch out as our own as professionals to the cybersecurity community and see where some of the gaps are and some of the things where we need to teach and train and things like that. It sounds like you got a pretty good foothold on organizations and kind of where the perspective, the need is, right? So the business in general seems to be evolving into cybersecurity and the training mechanism that we would deploy and starting to kind of trend a merger of some kind. I noticed that at UCCS that they had set up a new program for an executive master's of business administration, and it was focused in cybersecurity. And I also, because I am an adjunct for Grand Canyon University, they actually started incorporating an emphasis in their business programs there as well, and that's out of Arizona. But it sounds like you've already got the edge on it and pushing forward and kind of know where we're going as far as different practicalities, different things you would want to teach. A little bit about the CMMC there I saw, and just Cyber 101 in general, and I think that's a good, when we talk about insider threat, we talk about a couple of other factors in there. So, I mean, just the elements that I think inside of a corporation and organization, those are the basics I think they should be teaching on an annual basis. So, I mean, it sounds like you could fit right in with those types of groups and be able to give that education on a daily basis, even as a third party entity, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's education is something that's very, close and core for me. We work very closely with academic institutions. And, a lot of the academic institutions are also at a place where they are looking at their curriculum to see how relevant and germane it is for preparing professionals to enter the cyber field in a myriad of capacities, and just making sure that their curriculum and what they're teaching is relevant for what students need to have as they enter the workplace. So there's certainly great opportunity for industry and academia more broadly. And, certainly that's a part of the vision and the type of relationships that I like to cultivate and partner with academic institutions just to be able to have that be a trusted industry partner,
Awesome.
whether it's training or formal education.
Awesome. Yeah. And so this idea behind managing security through change, it's only logical to make people knowledgeable about the ongoing problems and persistent attacks and all those different vulnerabilities coming in through everything, and then really weaving that into a daily conversation with those professionals that are already inside the company. But training is a key major part, especially when we talk about insider threat or even your basics behind phishing expeditions, things like that, where you're looking at email and the email pops up with a link, and the link, you click on the link, and then it seems like you just gave away everything, blew away the house, right? And it seems just horrific, and which it could be catastrophic. A lot of times that's how a lot of the threat gets inside. So
that's right.
Yeah. So it's amazing to me. I think these days that how much that we're starting to see cybersecurity in general be deployed, and how the interest is perking. And I see a lot more jobs. I see a lot more companies coming up and asking for professionals that've got experience. So, I mean, it's becoming more valid, more preferable. They're acknowledging it more. We're starting to see a trend for budget for it, things of that thing.
Yes.
So, I mean, what do you see on the forefront for the next 5 to 10 years coming at us as a cybersecurity professional?
Yeah, the interesting thing that I always note is that sometimes when we have these compromises that we read about in the news, it can give the impression that there are all of these Einstein hackers running around. And the reality is that organizations, unfortunately, just aren't taking care of some of the lower hanging fruit or basic cyber hygiene, as it's called.
Yeah.
Right. And some of the reasons they aren't making some of the updates in a timely manner is because there's always this question around, well, what's going to be the functional impact? What's going to break on my system if I make that security update? Right. And it's a fair question.
Sure.
But I think increasingly there's a recognition that just because you're humming along and working functionally in the short term, it's a big risk to assume that you can just ignore security and security updates and changes and configurations for long periods of time and not pay a price for it. So, 80% of security breaches are due to misconfigured or unpatched systems, right?
Yeah. And
the average cost of a breach in the US is about $3.9 million for organizations, US organizations. So that's a pretty, steep amount. And that amount can go up quite a bit the larger the organization, right? But
and then all the individuals and everything else that compresses into that factor. So.
That's right. And small businesses where reputation is everything, right? Like a lot of small businesses, they just don't recover between the cost and the reputational cost, the financial and the reputational cost. A lot of small businesses don't recover, and small businesses constitute such a large and significant portion of the US GDP, right? Like, so small business isn't insignificant. So I think over the, next 5-10 years, what I'm hoping to see and the type of ventures that I'm working on are those that would position the U.S. and organizations here to be able to pay attention to the lower hanging fruit, to the non-sexier stuff, but the nonetheless necessary and vital things. I'd hope to see a trend towards that, because we have all of these really exciting kind of tools and exciting disciplines, threat hunting. I mean, that sounds so much better than, like solid patch management, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It's like, it sounds like,
gotta make it sound cool, right? So that's super
Yeah. And it's like, it's definitely a great discipline, threat hunting and the like. But it's important that we don't get beyond seeing and recognizing that some of the basic mundane type of activities that need to be undertaken from a cyber perspective can't be overlooked. So I'm hoping that, maybe we'll find some way to make some of the mundane stuff, we can rebrand it so it sounds like more engaging. But I would hope to. So, exactly.
Cyber police, and they're talking about cyber crime.
Something. Exactly.
Cyber, and, there's all kinds of wonderful words.
So, the hacker stoppers or whatever,
I usually get, when my students come in, I think the jazz ends up being, and there's always catchphrases here, but hacker always comes to mind. And every time we get into the cybersecurity, the first thing we chat about in the first couple of classes is being a hacker. And, how did they get in? And can you tell me how to do that? And first off, we have to go through the ethical questions, and a lot of times I got to establish that before I go any further about discussing something. And then, of course, we get into the whole black hat and the white hat idea, and where the gray areas are, and so there's philosophical questions in there when you start talking. So go ahead.
No, I was in absolute agreement. There are a lot of philosophical questions. And I remember talking to a group of, younger students, middle school, high school. And, one young man was like, well, if I do this kind of DDoS thing because the gaming provider that I'm working with isn't responding to me quick enough, could I go to jail for that?
It's like, are you asking me after you've done it?
Exactly. I'm like, you should go, read the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And,
well, there's some education there. So
Exactly.
Scare straight. So, usually that's the type of stuff I get as well. I don't, the audience is always captivated by the idea of cyber, and it's a good buzzword. But when it gets down into it, when you do those controls and have to write to those controls, I think there's where we get into that task that nobody sees, that and the debate that goes on about what the verbiage, how you wrote it, what you did. And just really does that cover systems, minors and major changes in systems and things of that nature, and whether or not, how impactful that could be to everyday operations, right? So, I mean, the fact that cybersecurity, the elements that suffice within today's arena, I mean, I guess you could say, as far as systems goes, do you think that technically there's something that should be evolving, just besides the measure of cyber by itself, implying itself, like an application that's developed and implied on the system, but the system itself, from a manufacturer's perspective, they should be doing things too. I mean, don't you agree that's kind of where we should be going with such changes in systems? And when an organization goes out to buy that system, there should be some elements that are kind of built in. In other words, kind of thinking of cybersecurity or security from the get-go, from the beginning, right? I think that's the notion of secure by design, right? And that's exactly it. And there was an IoT, Internet of Things bill that passed, I want to say earlier this year. I think it's
and with the federal government, there's a requirement now that certain IoT that gets purchased by, the federal government has to have certain security protections already designed into it. Right. Like, so I think NIST has been working on the requirements for IoT security components. And, I think that while it might be for federal government now, kind of laying down that hammer, I don't think it's going to be too long before other industries and sectors, especially other critical infrastructure sectors, follow suit. When you think about what IoT with all these sensors and, where they're embedded, these embedded systems and the like, what they have access to and what compromising them the implications that could be had. It's one thing to lose data. It's another thing when loss of life is literally a part of what could happen. You think of medical devices and, if those get compromised, what those are responsible for.
things like that.
Yeah, heart rates and how much medicine to dispense, or, setting a pace, for your heart, and, like those things getting compromised or hacked. It's like, it's
right?
not just life and death at the,
exactly.
on that's exactly it. So yeah, I do. I definitely agree that, manufacturers, system developers, et cetera, increasingly there needs to be just a part of that process where the design of security is baked in up front, and then also just maintained as the product matures and needs to get updated while it's deployed in the marketplace.
Yeah, I think there's been an uptick of that. I've got coworkers and friends that are in the field of automations for Toyota and different manufacturers of automobiles, and the ongoing measures of trying to come up with the automations and the autonomy of the car perspective to become full autonomous. They're adamant about trying to get the restraints or the risk down value wise when it comes to implementing and hardening specific systems. And these days, a car when they're made is crazy. There's so much more computer technology in such a thing now than there ever has been.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
We're going to take a break right now, and we'll come back in with Tina. So we're going to take a break and hear from our sponsors.
Blockframe Technology offers next-generation blockchain-managed trust and security. Unique non-fungible tokens are used to secure software bills of materials to provide data quality and security for every transaction in your supply chain. Deploy advanced peer-to-peer product security, scale zero trust capability to millions of IoT devices, allow vendor tracking and accountability, and rapidly reset from compromise. Unchangeable, time-sequenced blockchain data provides next-generation security using machine learning trust algorithms and audit analytics. Start securing your supply chain today by contacting Blockframe at www.blockframetech.com.
We're back. New Cyber Frontier. I'm your host, Timothy Montgomery. I'm here with Tina from SciSkills. Yes, sir. And the fact that we were just talking about before the break was the implementations of specific hardening of new ideas entering into the whole entire idea of networking components together, devices, and the more we become dependent on it, especially when it comes to life. So concepts there are just, it's riddling to me that over a period of time, we don't seem to be jumping fast enough almost at some points. And then it is almost belittling or bewildering, I guess you could say more, that companies in general they just don't seem to, either there's not funding for it or budget or something's going on here. I mean, as the market seems to get more and more serious about how cybersecurity should fit into the plan of managing a real organization. So, I mean, what are some of the things you see out there when you teach corporations, organizations, and training and stuff, and you get these questions? What kind of questions that come across to you that kind of says, okay, they're taking it serious or they're not taking it serious? What's going on here, right?
Yeah, I think, I think this is where cyber and just the cost and budgeting of cyber meet is at the question of risk management, right? So it really becomes a question of, this is what our budget is. What should we prioritize from a cyber perspective? Like what issues are the highest risk? So if we've got this set amount of money, like what should we be looking to address first?
Yeah, the prioritization,
in order to mitigate risk, right? And then some of it is like, okay, well, we didn't really have a set aside cyber budget this year, but for next year when we're planning, like how much of a budget, like how much money exactly should we be setting aside for a future year, and being more proactive with managing a cybersecurity budget and changes and having money for that. And then the third, question is just really along the lines of, if this is where we are from a security or risk posture perspective, and this is where we want to be, how much does it cost to get us from where we are to where we want to be? right? And is paying that amount of money, is that commensurate with supporting our risk tolerance, our risk appetite, and like who we are known as or known for as an organization? So, I do feel like the questions are being asked, and the best way in which the questions are answered is certainly like in a risk driven approach, because there's never an infinite budget. Yeah. And security really is kind of that like preventative measure. So it's not like a money maker for most organizations, unless your business is cyber, right?
Yeah,
it becomes like exactly.
Yeah.
So then it's just kind of like, okay, well, we've got to balance both budget as well as like reputation and finance risk, because you can't just ignore it, right? And not everything, I talk to students about the fact that you don't spend $1 million to protect a $5 asset.
Right.
So there really needs to be, right, like an awareness of the business. And I think that's sometimes like where it is right. Like the mission of the organization, like what is their, what are their crown jewels?
Yeah,
it is. That's exactly it. So because you might not make the same investment for protecting every part of your system or environment, you make an investment based upon where the highest risk items are that if it were compromised would have the highest impact. So while you might spend, $1 million protecting this part of your networking system, you may only spend like a few thousand protecting this other, part, because like the impact of the two could be just drastically different, or the likelihood of, being able to compromise. And either way, it makes the risk lower or higher, and your investment should match to and be commensurate with what the risk is.
Do you see more trend of people when they come in as a student, even if they haven't learned anything about cybersecurity, kind of knowing something about cybersecurity more in general from the previous past history? Are they starting to see more of that in a public type thing common?
Yeah, I think that, there's, what I see is that individuals know more than they think sometimes about cybersecurity. They're interacting with it regularly as we see like consumer type of applications and the like starting to incorporate security. But they wouldn't necessarily call it that, right? Like they know that, all of a sudden for Facebook, I can set this thing up where I get not only enter my password, but I also can get this code to my phone that I enter in.
Yeah,
right? Or, okay. Yeah. So there are ways in which I think the general populace and even non-tech and non-cyber professionals are interacting with cybersecurity without necessarily recognizing or being able to articulate, that it is cybersecurity. But then when you ask them questions around, they're like, okay. So that's security.
That's it.
So that's it.
Well, I know most of the when you talk about interacting in systems when it comes to organizations, usually I mentioned a little bit about in here about supply chain. CMMC and the new risk management framework have taken on a lot of that implementations of how the supply chain is going to impact those that have already maintained a posture. And then those that will eventually, that have been doing business, need to bring that posture up some. So, I mean, some of the allocations and things, and we're talking about risks that are at third parties. The elements there are certainly something that needs to be taken serious. And I think what we're trending and seeing in the cybersecurity community is definitely the next round of trying to secure that base. I remember, lots of times when we would talk about regulations, we would get infrastructure, and so we would buy from vendors, and the vendor would give us something. However, they didn't know what they were actually giving us, and what we would find is vulnerabilities in there. And so we would go back to them, and they didn't quite have anything to do. So you get into the vendors and manufacturers. Dell's definitely got a backlog of things, and they actually did something about it and changed up and had a federation and basically made it their own department when they're selling to different agencies in the government. And the TAA, the idea behind a product that's made in a certain place, or if it's a fake product, how authenticated or genuine is it type of things. And that goes to license volumes and things like that. So, I mean, do you see big trends in them understanding, like businesses understanding in general? Do you teach a lot of that to your customer set?
Yeah. That's, for one of our customers, actually, we're responsible for helping to bolster and secure their supply chain, right? Yeah. Like, so it's not just about the security of their systems, but it's about the security of the suppliers who they're sending data to, who are processing, storing, and transmitting some of that same sensitive data on their behalf. Yeah. So, all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, we can't just think about cybersecurity in terms of our immediate boundary of our systems and our environment, but we also have to consider that of our suppliers because the data is going to them as well. So it matters, the cybersecurity, of our customer suppliers. So, that's, we are doing some assistance there with, some customers is helping them secure their supply chain. And while CMMC right now is squarely focused on and being driven by DoD, I certainly envision that other critical infrastructure sectors wouldn't be too far behind in following suit. In fact, I think in the energy sector, that's already the case, right? Because the question is exactly the same. When you're thinking about protecting critical infrastructure and very sensitive data, be it, government classified type data or data related to maintaining the critical infrastructure in the U.S., it's important that every, link in the chain has a certain security posture. And, sometimes identifying exactly who or what those components are in the chain is one of the challenges, right? Like, so, there's your known supply chain that you want to ensure is secure, but then you also want to understand that you are clear on all of the pieces and parts of your supply chain. Yeah. There's nothing like having like a shadow, portion of the supply chain where it's just like,
what's going on there? There's a gap.
Yeah, exactly. Well, because that's a risk.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's surprises coming around the corner for individuals that haven't quite been paying attention, and this starts to open doors, and they start to examine as they go down the lane. And it's supposed to help, bring forward some of the areas that could be potentially high risk, and something we haven't examined before, and we didn't do a great detailing of such vulnerability avenues or threat vectors. And so this is supposed to bring about, some elements that will help support. In other words, it will stop way back before it gets to the front door, hopefully, before it manages to get right in the mix of things. And we're in the middle of a $5 million contract, and I've got to get rid of the chassis because it came from somewhere else it shouldn't have. And now they're like, okay, we just spent $1.2 million on this thing. Now you're going to tell me we can't use it? Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Now you want to talk about it? Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just this craziness. Well, it was good chatting with you. And I think in summary here, I think most people understand that the business is starting to trend, and cybersecurity is starting to be a very comparable piece to business everyday tasking. Right? Organizations are starting to trend and pick up on this and starting to take it as a value to protecting everything they do on a daily basis. Every organization is starting to see this, from the very smallest to some of the major, organizations and things of that nature. So even agencies, the majority of agencies are starting to blend into that, and then we even got countries starting to ask us, especially on the power grid, their utility, their companies. So.
Exactly.
Well, thanks for coming, Tina. And is there anything you'd like to say to the audience before we go?
I would say check us out, scikills.com for training. We've got a great course coming up related to some more secure third generation blockchain type of technology. So stay tuned for those courses coming soon, the Philos Marketplace and Blockframe 101. So check out scikills.com in the coming weeks and months. And thank you for being an attentive audience.
All right. So that's our show for today. I hope everybody got something out of the deal. I know I did. And I'm your host, Tim Montgomery. And until next session, we'll say goodbye. This is New Cyber Frontier.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of New Cyber Frontier. Remember to get involved. Often we think that someone else will handle privacy and security in the virtual world, but you are the only one truly in command of your virtual fate. Join our mailing list so we can keep you informed of breaking news and new releases. If you have an idea, if you have a question that you would like to hear answered, or if you want to get involved with our efforts, reach out to us at newcyberfrontier.com. We also encourage you to visit our sponsors' links, as they are the ones that really make this show possible. I want to thank each of you for supporting the show, and we look forward to seeing you back for the next episode of New Cyber Frontier.